Welcome to the XFO Intelligence Podcast's Complex Q series, where complex questions are deeply analyzed and addressed using the deep augmented thinking method. I'm your host, and today we're diving into a question that's keeping strategists awake at night. As the lines between industries blur, what new analytical frameworks should replace traditional Porter's five forces to assess the competitive landscape? Let me start with a provocative observation. Apple is a bank. Tesla is an energy company. Amazon is a healthcare provider. If that sounds strange to you, you're thinking in the old paradigm, and that's exactly the problem. For decades, we've operated with clear industry boundaries. Automakers built cars, banks managed money, insurers underwrote risk. Competition happened within these lanes, governed by established rules and predictable rivals. But today, those lanes have dissolved entirely. Here's the critical insight. When industries converge, the competitive landscape doesn't just shift, it fundamentally changes physics. The most dangerous threat to an incumbent is no longer the rival stealing market share today, but the orthogonal entrant making that market share irrelevant tomorrow. Let me explain what I mean by changing physics. Traditional strategy treated markets as geometry, static shapes and positions. Modern reality treats markets as physics, energy, velocity, and flow. Value doesn't move in linear supply chains anymore. It moves in radial networks. The first illusion we must shatter is the concept of industry boundaries themselves. Industries are artificial constructs. They're clusters of similar solutions, not similar customer needs. Think about it. Customers don't want a bank. They want to manage liquidity and verify trust. They don't want a car. They want mobility and status. When your strategy is anchored to solution categories like the banking industry, blind spots emerge everywhere. A technology company entering finance isn't competing on banking terms. It's competing on friction reduction. It leverages existing user interfaces and data networks to solve the underlying job with less effort than you can. So, here's the reframe. The competitive field must be redefined around the job to be done. When viewed through this lens, your competitor list expands exponentially. The question becomes, who owns the relationship required to solve the problem, not who sells what we sell. Now, let's talk about the anatomy of the invisible threat. In a converging landscape, dangerous competitors share a specific profile. They rarely attack head-on. Instead, they exploit three critical asymmetries. First, leverage asymmetry. Traditional competitors operate with similar cost structures. Converging competitors operate with fundamentally different economics. A software-led entrant has near zero marginal costs for replication. When a competitor can deploy capital with 100 times the leverage of an incumbent, traditional defenses like pricing or scale become obsolete. The threat isn't outspending, it's out-leveraging. Second, interface ownership. Power accrues to the entity that controls the interface between the user and the value. In automotive, the manufacturer owns the hardware, but the operating system owns the screen. If a technology provider controls the interface, the hardware manufacturer risks becoming a commoditized supplier. The dangerous competitor is the one inserting themselves between you and your customer, owning the data and attention while you own the asset liability. Third, friction arbitrage. Convergence often happens where friction is highest. Incumbents are burdened by legacy processes, regulatory compliance, technical debt. Entrants from adjacent sectors identify these friction points and bypass them entirely. They don't fix the broken process, they build a new path around it. The competitor that reduces customer effort captures the value flow, even if their core product is inferior in traditional metrics. Here's a fundamental truth that most strategists miss. Competitive advantage in this environment is determined by network topology. The most powerful players are those who occupy the central nodes where multiple value streams intersect. These orchestrators don't necessarily produce the end product, they facilitate the exchange. They build reinforcing loops where more users generate more data, which improves the product, which attracts more users.
This creates a winner-take-most environment. Once a network effect achieves critical mass, it creates a moat based not on assets, but on momentum. Meanwhile, incumbents find themselves trapped in balancing loops where revenue growth requires investment in legacy infrastructure, which increases technical debt, which slows innovation. The incumbent isn't defeated, they're simply bypassed by a more efficient network. Now, here's the fractal insight. Internal structure mirrors external reality. An organization cannot navigate a fluid, converging external environment with a rigid, siloed internal structure. If the market is merging technology, hardware, and services, but your company is organized into distinct IT, manufacturing, and sales departments, friction is inevitable. The speed of external convergence will outpace your internal decision-making. To compete with ecosystem players, incumbents must dissolve their own internal boundaries. Cross-functional agility isn't just an operational improvement, it's a strategic necessity. If your internal system is less complex than the external environment, you'll fail to respond to threats until it's too late. So, how do you detect these invisible threats? Because convergence threats often emerge from the periphery, traditional market research focused on core competitors is insufficient. You need peripheral vision. Scan for weak signals in adjacent sectors. Watch capital flows. Where is venture capital investing outside your industry? High investment in biotech AI signals a future threat to traditional pharma. Track talent migration. Where are top engineers moving? Talent flows toward leverage. If data scientists are flocking to retail, expect retail to become a tech competitor. Monitor regulatory voids. Where are new technologies operating without clear rules? Convergers scale rapidly in these spaces before regulation catches up. The goal is to reduce the latency between a market shift and organizational response. In an era of convergence, speed of adaptation is the only sustainable moat. This brings us to the strategic mandate, shifting from position to flow. Modern leadership must optimize value flow, not defend market position. This requires 3 fundamental shifts. 1. Own the job, not the product. Define your business by the customer problem you solve, not the asset you sell. This reveals competitors who solve the same problem differently. 2. Optimize for flow, not stock. Measure success not by accumulated assets, inventory, headcount, but by flow metrics, data velocity, customer engagement, network density. 3. Build routes, not walls. Traditional strategy focuses on barriers to entry. Convergent strategy focuses on connections. Build deep integrations with partners, platforms, and customers to become indispensable to the ecosystem's function. Let me bring this home with a stark conclusion. The blurring of industry lines isn't a temporary disruption, it's the new baseline of commerce. The competitive landscape is no longer a chessboard with distinct pieces, but a living ecosystem where organisms compete for energy and connection. The most dangerous competitor is the one you don't see on your industry report. They're the entity optimizing the network you rely on, owning the interface you ignore, and solving the customer's problem with less friction than you can muster. To survive, leaders must stop looking at who they're fighting today and start mapping where the value is flowing tomorrow. In the end, stability is a liability. The only safe position is motion. If you found this analysis valuable, please like, share, and subscribe to the XFO Intelligence Podcast. We tackle complex questions that matter to strategic leaders navigating uncertainty. And if you have a complex problem that needs deep analytical thinking, we want to hear from you. Email us at xfointelligence@gmail.com. Until next time, keep questioning, keep thinking, and keep moving. This has been the XFO Intelligence Podcast Complex Q series with Deep Augmented Thinking, February 2026.